Good morning. Today I'm going to read to you a very exciting part of the book James and the Giant Peach by Roald Dahl, written in 1961, published by Penguin Books USA in 2007, and I have permission to read this from Access. Copyright. Chapter 18. A minute later, they were out in the open, standing on the very top of the peach, near the stem, blinking their eyes in the strong sunlight and peering nervously around. What happened? Where are we? But this is impossible. Unbelievable. Terrible. I told you we were bobbing up and down, the ladybug said. We're in the middle of the sea, cried James. And indeed they were. A strong current and a high wind had carried the peach so quickly away from the shore that already the land was out of sight. All around them lay the vast black ocean, deep and hungry. Little waves were bibbling up against the side of the peach. But how did it happen? They cried. Where are the fields? Where are the woods? Where is England? Nobody, not even James, could understand how in the world a thing like this could have come about. Ladies and gentlemen, the old green grasshopper said, trying very hard to keep the fear and disappointment out of his voice. I am afraid that we find ourselves in a rather awkward situation. Awkward? Cried the earthworm. My dear old grasshopper, we are finished. Every one of us is about to perish. I may be blind, you know, but that much I can see quite clearly. Off with my boots, shouted the centipede. I cannot swim with my boots on. I can't swim at all, cried the ladybug. Nor can I, wailed the glowworm. Nor I, said Miss Spider. None of us three girls can swim a single stroke. But you won't have to swim, said James calmly. We're floating beautifully, and sooner or later a ship is bound to come along and pick us up. They all stared at him in amazement. Are you quite sure that we are not sinking? The ladybug asked. Of course I'm sure, answered James. Go and look for yourselves. They all ran over to the side of the peach and peered down at the water below. The boy is quite right, the old green grasshopper said. We are floating beautifully. Now we must all sit down and keep perfectly calm. Everything will be quite all right in the end. What absolute nonsense, cried the earthworm. Nothing is ever all right in the end, and well you know it. Poor earthworm, the ladybug said, whispering in James's ear. He loves to make everything into a disaster. He hates to be happy. He is only happy when he is gloomy. Now, isn't that odd? But then, I suppose just being an earthworm is enough to make a person pretty gloomy. Don't you agree? If this peach is not going to sink, the earthworm was saying, and if we are not going to be drowned, then every one of us is going to starve to death instead. Do you realize that we haven't had a thing to eat since yesterday morning? By golly, he's right, cried the centipede. For once, earthworm is right. Of course I'm right, the earthworm said. And we're not likely to find anything around here either. We shall get thinner and thinner and thirstier, and we shall all die a slow and grisly death from starvation. I am dying already. I am slowly shriveling up for want of food. Personally, I would rather drown. But good heavens, you must be blind, said James. You know very well I'm blind, snapped the earthworm. There's no need to rub it in. I didn't mean that, said James quickly. I'm sorry. But can't you see that? See, shouted the earthworm. How can I see if I am blind? James took a slow, deep breath. Can't you realize, he said patiently, that we have enough food here to last us weeks and weeks? Where? They said. Where? Why, the Peach, of course. Our whole ship is made of food. Jumping Jehoshaphat, they cried. We never thought of that. My dear James, said the old green grasshopper, laying a front leg affectionately on James's shoulder. I don't know what we'd do without you. You are so clever. Ladies and gentlemen, we are saved again. We are most certainly not, said the earthworm. You must be crazy. You can't eat the ship. It's the only thing that is keeping us up. We shall starve if we don't, said the centipede. And we shall drown if we do, cried the earthworm. Oh dear, said the old green grasshopper. Now we're worse off than before. Couldn't we just eat a little bit of it? Asked Miss Spider. I am so dreadfully hungry. You can eat all you want, James answered. It would take us weeks and weeks to make any sort of a dent in this enormous peach. Surely you can see that. Good heavens, he's right again, cried the old green grasshopper, clapping his hands. It would take weeks and weeks. Of course it would. But let's not go making a lot of holes all over the deck. I think we'd better simply scoop it out of the tunnel over there, the one that we've just come up by. An excellent idea, said the ladybug. What are you looking so worried about, earthworm? The centipede asked. What's the problem? The problem is, the earthworm said. The problem is, there is no problem. Everyone burst out laughing. Cheer up, earthworm, they said. Come and eat. And they all went over to the tunnel entrance and began scooping out great chunks of juicy, golden-colored peach flesh. Oh, marvelous, said the centipede, stuffing it into his mouth. Delicious, said the old green grasshopper. Just fabulous, said the glowworm. Oh my, said the ladybug primly. What a heavenly taste. She looked up at James and she smiled, and James smiled back at her. They sat down on the deck together, both of them chewing away happily. You know, James, the ladybug said, up until this moment, I have never in my life tasted anything except those tiny little green flies that live on rose bushes. They have a perfectly delightful flavor. But this peach is even better. Isn't it glorious? Miss Spider said, coming over to join them. Personally, I had always thought that a big, juicy, caught-in-the-web bluebottle was the finest dinner in the world, until I tasted this. What a flavor, the centipede cried. It's terrific. There's nothing like it. There never has been. And I should know because I personally have tasted all the finest foods in the world. Whereupon the centipede, with his mouth full of peach and with juice running down all over his chin, suddenly burst into song. I've eaten many strange and scrumptious dishes in my time, like jellied gnats and dandy prats and earwigs cooked in slime, and mice with rice. They're really nice when roasted in their prime, but don't forget to sprinkle them with just a pinch of grime. I've eaten fresh mudburgers by the greatest cooks there are, and scrambled dregs and stink bugs' eggs and hornets stewed in tar, and pails of snails and lizards' tails and beetles by the jar. A beetle is improved by just a splash of vinegar. I've eaten boiled slobbages, they're grand when served beside minced doodlebugs and curried slugs. And have you ever tried mosquitoes' toes and wampfish roes, most delicately fried? The only trouble is they disagree with my inside. I'm mad for crispy wasp stings on a piece of buttered toast, and pickled spines of porcupines, and then a gorgeous roast of dragon's flesh, well hung, not fresh. It costs $1 at most, and comes to you in barrels if you order it by post. I crave the tasty tentacles of octopi for tea. I like hot dogs, I love hot frogs, and certainly you'll agree. A plate of soil with engine's oil, a super recipe. I hardly need to mention that it's practically free. For dinner on my birthday, shall I tell you what I chose? Hot noodles made from poodles on a slice of garden hose, and a rather smelly jelly made from armadillo's toes. The jelly is delicious, but you have to hold your nose. Now comes, the centipede declare, the burden of my speech. These foods are rare beyond compare, some are right out of reach. But there's no doubt I'd go without 1,000,000 plates of each for one small mite, one tiny bite of this fantastic peach. Everybody was feeling happy now. The sun was shining brightly out of a soft blue sky, and the day was calm. The giant peach, with the sunlight glinting on its side, was like a massive golden ball sailing upon a silver sea. Chapter 19. "Look!" cried the centipede, just as they were finishing their meal. "Look at that funny, thin, black thing gliding through the water over there." They all swung around to look. "There are 2 of them," said Miss Spider. "There are lots of them," said the ladybug. "What are they?" asked the earthworm, getting worried. "They must be some kind of fish," said the old green grasshopper. "Perhaps they have come along to say hello." "They are sharks!" cried the earthworm. "I'll bet you anything you like that they are sharks, and that they have come along to eat us up." "What absolute rot!" the centipede said. But his voice seemed suddenly to have become a little shaky, and he wasn't laughing. "I am positive that they are sharks," said the earthworm. "I just know they are sharks." And so, in actual fact, did everybody else, but they were too frightened to admit it. There was a short silence. They all peered down anxiously at the sharks, who were cruising slowly round and round the peach. "Just assuming that they are sharks," the centipede said, "there still can't possibly be any danger if we stay up here." But even as he spoke, one of those thin black fins suddenly changed direction and came cutting swiftly through the water, right up to the side of the peach itself. The shark paused and stared up at the company with small, evil eyes. "Go away!" they shouted. "Go away, you filthy beast!" Slowly, almost lazily, the shark opened his mouth, which was big enough to have swallowed a perambulator, and made a lunge at the peach. They all watched aghast, and now, as though at a signal from the leader, all the other sharks came swimming in toward the peach, and they clustered around it and began to attack it furiously. There must have been 20 or 30 of them at least, all pushing and fighting and lashing their tails and churning the water into a froth. Panic and pandemonium broke out immediately on top of the peach. "Oh, we are finished now," cried Miss Spider, wringing her feet. "They will eat up the whole peach, and then there'll be nothing left for us to stand on, and they'll start on us." "She is right," shouted the ladybug. "We are lost forever." "Oh, I don't want to be eaten," wailed the earthworm. "But they will take me first of all because I'm so fat and juicy and I have no bones." "Is there nothing we can do?" asked the ladybug, appealing to James. "Surely you can think a way out of this." Suddenly, they were all looking at James. "Think," begged Miss Spider. "Think, James, think." Come on, said the centipede. Come on, James. There must be something we can do. Their eyes waited upon him, tense, anxious, pathetically hopeful. Chapter 20. There is something that I believe we might try, James Henry Trotter said slowly. I'm not saying it'll work. Tell us, cried the earthworm. Tell us quick. We'll try anything you say, said the centipede, but hurry, hurry, hurry. Be quiet and let the boy speak, said the ladybug. Go on, James. They all moved a little closer to him. There was a longish pause. Go on, they cried frantically. Go on. And all the time, while they were waiting, they could hear the sharks threshing around in the water below them. It was enough to make anyone frantic. Come on, James, the ladybug said, coaxing him. I'm afraid it's no good after all, James murmured, shaking his head. I'm terribly sorry, I forgot. We don't have any string. We'd need hundreds of yards of string to make this work. What sort of string? Asked the old green grasshopper sharply. Any sort, just so long as it's strong. But my dear boy, that's exactly what we do have. We've got all you want. How? Where? The silkworm, cried the old green grasshopper. Didn't you ever notice the silkworm? She's still downstairs. She never moves. She just lies there sleeping all day long. But we can easily wake her up and make her spin. And what about me, may I ask? Asked Miss Spider. I can spin just as well as any silkworm. What's more, I can spin patterns. Can you make enough between you? Asked James. As much as you want. And quickly? Of course, of course. And would it be strong? The strongest there is. It's as thick as your finger. But why? What are you going to do? I'm going to lift this peach clear out of the water, James announced firmly. You're mad, cried the earthworm. It's our only chance. The boy's crazy. He's joking. Go on, James, the ladybug said gently. How are you going to do it? Skyhooks, I suppose, jeered the centipede. Seagulls, James answered calmly. The place is full of them. Look up there. They all looked up and saw a great mass of seagulls wheeling round and round in the sky. I'm going to take a long silk string, James went on, and I'm going to loop one end of it around a seagull's neck. And then I'm going to tie the other end of it to the stem of the peach. He pointed to the peach stem, which was standing up like a short, thick mast in the middle of the deck. Then I'm going to get another seagull and do the same thing again. Then another and another. Ridiculous, they shouted. Absurd. Poppycock. Balderdash. Madness. And then the old green grasshopper said, how can a few seagulls lift an enormous thing like this up into the air, and all of us as well? It would take hundreds, thousands. There's no shortage of seagulls, James answered. Look for yourself. We'll probably need 400, 500, 600, maybe even 1,000. I don't know. I shall simply go on hooking them up to the stem until we have enough to lift us. They'll be bound to lift us in the end. It's like balloons. You give someone enough balloons to hold, I mean really enough, then up he goes. And a seagull has far more lifting power than a balloon. If only we have the time to do it. If only we are not sunk first by those awful sharks. You're absolutely off your head, said the earthworm. How on earth do you propose to get a loop of string around a seagull's neck? I suppose you're going to fly up there yourself and catch it? The boy's dotty, said the centipede. Let him finish, said the ladybug. Go on, James. How would you do it? With bait. Bait. What sort of bait? with a worm, of course. Seagulls love worms. Didn't you know that? And luckily for us, we have here the biggest, fattest, pinkest, juiciest earthworm in the world. You can stop right there, the earthworm said sharply. That's quite enough. Go on, the others said, beginning to grow interested. Go on. The seagulls have already spotted him, James continued. That's why there are so many of them circling around. But they daren't come down to get him while all of the rest of us are standing here. So this is what... Stop! Cried the earthworm. Stop, stop, stop. I won't have it. I refuse. Be quiet, said the centipede. Mind your own business. I like that. My dear earthworm, you're going to be eaten anyway. So what difference does it make whether it's sharks or seagulls? I won't do it. Why don't we hear what the plan is first, said the old green grasshopper. I don't give a hoot what the plan is, cried the earthworm. I am not going to be pecked to death by a bunch of seagulls. You will be a martyr, said the centipede. I shall respect you for the rest of my life. So will I, said Miss Spider, and your name will be in all the newspapers. Earthworm gives life to save friends. But he won't have to give his life, James told them. Now listen to me. This is what we'll do. Chapter 21. Why, it's absolutely brilliant, cried the old green grasshopper when James had explained his plan. The boy's a genius, the centipede announced. Now, I can keep my boots on after all. Oh, I shall be pecked to death, wailed the poor earthworm. Of course you won't. I will, I know I will, and I won't even be able to see them coming at me because I have no eyes. James went over and put an arm gently around the earthworm's shoulders. I won't let them touch you, he said. I promise, I won't, but we've got to hurry. Look down there. There were more sharks than ever now around the peach. The water was boiling with them. There must have been 90 or 100 at least, and to the travelers up on top it certainly seemed as though the peach were sinking lower and lower into the water. Action stations, James shouted. Jump to it, there's not a moment to lose. He was the captain now, and everyone knew it. They would do whatever he told them. All hands below deck except Earthworm, he ordered. Yes, yes, they said eagerly as they scuttled into the tunnel entrance. Come on, let's hurry. And you, Centipede, James shouted. Hop downstairs and get that silkworm to work at once. Tell her to spin as she's never spun before. Our lives depend upon it. And the same applies to you, Miss Spider. Hurry on down. Start spinning. Chapter 22. In a few minutes, everything was ready. It was very quiet now on the top of the peach. There was nobody in sight, nobody except the earthworm. One half of the earthworm, looking like a great, thick, juicy pink sausage, lay innocently in the sun for all the seagulls to see. The other half of him was dangling down the tunnel. James was crouching close beside the earthworm in the tunnel entrance, just below the surface, waiting for the first seagull. He had a loop of silk string in his hands. The old green grasshopper and the ladybug were further down the tunnel, holding on to the earthworm's tail, ready to pull him quickly out of danger as soon as James gave the word. And far below, in the great hollow stone of the peach, the glowworm was lighting up the room so that the two spinners, the silkworm and Miss Spider, could see what they were doing. The centipede was down there too, exhorting them both frantically to greater efforts, and every now and again James could hear his voice coming up faintly from the depths, shouting, "Spin, silkworm! Spin, you great fat lazy brute! Faster, faster, or we'll throw you to the sharks!" "Here comes the first seagull," whispered James. Keep still now, Earthworm. Keep still. The rest of you get ready to pull. Please don't let it spike me, begged the Earthworm. I won't. Shh. Out of the corner of one eye, James watched the seagull as it came swooping down towards the Earthworm. And then, suddenly, it was so close that he could see its small black eyes and its curved beak, and the beak was open, ready to grab a nice piece of flesh out of the Earthworm's back. Pull! Shouted James. The old green grasshopper and the ladybug gave the Earthworm's tail an enormous tug, and like magic the Earthworm disappeared into the tunnel. At the same time, up went James's hand, and the seagull flew right into the loop of silk that he had been holding out. The loop, which had been cleverly made, tightened just the right amount, not too much, around its neck, and the seagull was captured. Hooray! Shouted the old green grasshopper, peering out of the tunnel. Well done, James. Up flew the seagull with James paying out the silk string as it went. He gave it about 50 yards and then tied the string to the stem of the peach. Next one, he shouted, jumping back into the tunnel. Up you get again, Earthworm. Bring up some more silk, Centipede. Oh, I don't like this at all, wailed the Earthworm. It only just missed me. I even felt the wind on my back as it went swishing past. Shh, whispered James. Keep still. Here comes another one. So they did it again, and again, and again, and again. And the seagulls kept coming, and James caught them after the other and tethered them to the peach stem. 100 seagulls, he shouted, wiping the sweat from his face. Keep going, they cried. Keep going, James. 200 seagulls. 300 seagulls. 400 seagulls. The sharks, as though sensing that they were in danger of losing their prey, were hurling themselves at the peach more furiously than ever, and the peach was sinking lower and lower still in the water. 500 seagulls, James shouted. Silkworm says she's running out of silk, yelled the centipede from below. She says she can't keep it up much longer, nor can Miss Spider. Tell them they've got to, James said. They can't stop now. We're lifting, somebody shouted. No, we're not. I felt it. Put on another seagull, quick. Quiet, everyone, quiet. Here's one coming now. This was the 501st seagull, and the moment that James caught it and tethered it to the stem with all the others, the whole enormous peach suddenly started to rise up slowly out of the water. Look out! Here we go! Hold on, boys! And then it stopped, and there it hung. It hovered and swayed, but it went no higher. The bottom of it was just touching the water. It was like a delicately balanced scale that needed only the tiniest push to tip it one way or the other. One more will do it, shouted the old green grasshopper, looking out of the tunnel. We're almost there. And now came the big moment. Quickly, the 502nd seagull was caught and harnessed to the peach stem. And then suddenly, but slowly, majestically, like some fabulous golden balloon, with all the seagulls straining at the strings above, the giant peach rose up, dripping out of the water, and began climbing toward the heavens.